Welcome to the 62nd episode of Impact Media Presents Love versus Abuse with the Jenesse Center. And I'd like to welcome back our very special guest, Angela Parker, who is Director of Training and Programs at the Jenesse Center. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Hi, Kelly. Thank you so much for having me back.
Absolutely. So as we discussed in our first episode, we are having an ongoing series around domestic abuse and domestic abuse prevention and intervention. And we're just going to cover a plethora of topics over the series in multiple weeks. And I'm just so excited to have you come on today as we talk about the difference between love and abuse, what abuse look like, what is a definition of abuse, what are some of the warning signs. We want to talk about some of the personality traits of abusers and the traits that they seek in victims. And, we're going to kind of cover that today, and that's a lot to unpack. Really excited to have you here. And let's just jump right into it, Dr. Parker. Can I call Angela?
Please do. As a matter of fact, you can call me Angie because that's what everybody calls me.
Okay. Wonderful. Really appreciate you. And thank you so much for coming back. And just want to give a special shout out to your leader, Karen Earl, the CEO of the Jenesse Center. So grateful for her support and your support. But let's dig right in. Let's talk about the difference between, love and abuse. And let's start with, what does love look like? What does real love look like?
So, this is such an interesting question because a lot of times, like in the beginning, like abuse and love will look very similar. But I would always say that, real love, true love is based on you being able to be yourself. Like real communication, real trust. And it's also rooted in self-love, where you're not looking for somebody to complete you. Because when you're looking for somebody to complete you and make you whole, that makes you vulnerable to maybe dealing with situations that you wouldn't because you're afraid to be alone. So it's, communication, trust, feeling healthy and safe within yourself, and also feeling free to be yourself.
One of the reasons that I'm even asking this question is because even through conversations with, friends and people that I know, it appears that it's hard to recognize true love, and especially to recognize it. It takes time to see and reveal love. And I know we've had some conversations about how people put their best foot forward initially. And it can take months, it could take years for people to show their real selves. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, one of the things that I always tell people that they seem kind of surprised about is the fact that when you think of abusers, you tend to think of like crazy, like out of control people. And that's really not the case. I don't think anyone would get involved with anyone if they were violent or angry in their first encounter. Like oftentimes, like abusers are incredibly charming. Everybody's heard of the phrase love bomb, right? And so they tell you everything you want to hear. They'll buy you flowers, teddy bears, gifts, make you feel like you are the most special person in the world. And for a lot of people, that feels like love, right? We talked a little bit about our love language, right? And
Yes.
When the question becomes, what is love? Really, it's how do you want to be loved?
Right.
Are you a person that like feels like if you get gifts, that shows love? Maybe you just want a poem. Maybe you just want someone to spend time with you. Maybe you just want somebody to listen to you. Like we all have our different types of things that make us feel loved and make us feel valued. And abusers will hone in on that and figure that out, and they will use that against you. And so when you first get involved with this person, you think they're like the answer to your prayers, right? They're everything that you want. But the reason that everything that you want is because they are presenting a mask, right? They're creating a person that doesn't exist. This perfect man or woman that is something that they have created in order to lure you in. And in the
Yeah.
beginning, a lot of the stuff that they do seems romantic, right?
Mhm.
They're always texting you. Well, they just want to know how I am. But of course, what they're doing is they're keeping tabs on you. They may say they don't want you to hang out with your friends or family. And you're like, oh, they just want to spend time with me. But in truth, they're trying to isolate you.
Mhm.
They may start to criticize things that you like to do. Let's say you had a hobby that you love to do all the time, and all of a
Mhm.
sudden they're trying to make you feel guilty about doing that hobby. Again, trying to isolate you, trying to keep you to yourself, trying to manipulate you. I think the things, and we'll talk a little bit about sort of what you should be on the lookout for, because that's what everybody always asks me.
Yes.
Um, Sometimes the abuse, and we talked about this earlier, Kelly, is sort of masked and like a joke, right? Like
Yes.
I'll say, oh, you're looking fat today, ha ha ha, but I like fat, I like thick, or something like that. Or they like might
Mhm.
pinch you or something and just be like, but I'm just playing with you, like, what's the problem? Or they might like hit you, right? Like in a playful kind of way that like makes you feel uncomfortable. It's always an escalation of behavior, where the beginnings of it will be something that maybe you could shrug off as something that you're overreacting, but over time it continues to build up. What abusers do is they continue to cross boundaries. And that's also one of the reasons how they know that they are kind of with someone that they can manipulate, because if they continue to cross your boundaries, big and small, and you continue to stay and you continue to make excuses, then they kind of have an idea, okay, well, this is somebody that I kind of got them, right? And gaslighting is huge. I
Mhm.
mean, if you're with an abuser, they will be the first person to
Yeah.
make you feel like it's your fault. It's your
Right.
fault. You don't know what you're saying. You don't know what you're doing. You're
Hey,
overreacting.
what are you talking about? I'm not
Yeah,
doing
yeah.
anything. This isn't abusive. What are you talking about?
That never happened. Like, what are you,
Yeah.
you're misremembering, right? Why I never said that. And then you start to question, yourself, because it happened, and
Right.
it happened the way you thought, but then you're like, well, maybe it wasn't as bad. That's something too that tends to happen. If you're with somebody who is like always picking fights with you, right? They're jealous or possessive. They criticize everything you do, even in jest, right?
Mhm.
They are always moody and unpredictable, so it makes you afraid to them, because you don't know what they're going to say or do, or like how they're going to react. They blame you for everything if they're frustrated, like all your fault. Also, another thing, pay attention to how they use drugs and alcohol. Now, I would
Mm.
never say, that drugs and alcohol make someone abusive, because it doesn't, but it will exacerbate, right? Somebody that
Right.
has abusive behaviors. So
Yes.
if you see someone who's using drugs and alcohol a lot to reduce kind of tension or to make them feel better, that's kind of a red flag as well. Another is, and then we get into the stuff that is abusive. They're verbally assaulting you. They're sexually assaulting you, right? They're restraining you physically when you want to leave. They're destroying your property. You know what I mean? Punching holes in the wall, like taking your cell phone and flushing it down the toilet. um they're telling you that you deserve this, just emotionally beating you down, right? Those are definitely like red flags. But again, by the time you get to the point where they're physically assaulting you, a lot of times all these other things have happened
Right.
that you haven't recognized as abuse until you actually get to that point.
I want to go back to some of the more subtle ways.
Mhm.
What about if they have a requirement that they check and have access to your phone?
Yeah. Okay. So here's the thing, right?
Mhm. The
Because every
control.
relationship is different. Yeah,
Mhm.
but it's the control factor. So as long as everybody consents, it's fine. It's the power and control that makes a relationship abusive. So if you have a relationship where they look at your phone or all your passwords and everything, and you look at theirs and you're perfectly fine with that, then fantastic. Congratulations. That's you. But if you have a situation where somebody's demanding to see your phone, to see your passwords, to see what you're doing, and it's making you uncomfortable, but you feel like if you do not do it, there's going to be some type of consequence, that is abusive. Because you have a right to privacy. It's the same thing like if you have somebody that wants you to check in all the time. Why? You know what I mean? Because you have a right to quiet time. You don't owe anybody. You don't have to answer anybody's text. You don't have to answer anybody's phone call. You don't have to tell everybody where you are like all the time. But again, that kind of stuff shows up as I'm worried about you. I just want to make sure that you're okay. And sometimes it is just that. I don't want to say that everybody that says, hey, when you get somewhere, call me is abusive.
Right.
But you have to look at patterns. If they're consistently doing it, if they're consistently comfortable, like you have to report to them that, that they are in a way like more important than anything in your life or anything that you have going, you have to really kind of pay attention to that.
The other thing that I'd like to talk about is when there are double standards within a relationship. So the person has an expectation of you that they're not willing to live up to.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. And so, of course, that happens in like every relationship, right? I mean, we talk about, being equally yoked, right, with the person. But, we know relationships are always going to be 60-30, some days 70-10, or, okay, I'm bad with math. Sorry, 90-10 or whatever. But again, what you're looking for is a pattern of behavior. If you are with somebody who's constantly measuring you up to a level of perfection that you can never meet, right? So that's always going to give them some type of way to criticize you. You're never going to look as good as they want you to look. You're never going to be as smart as they want you to be. You're never going to make as much money. You're never going to be as successful because they've created unrealistic expectations for you. That's definitely something to think about. And then, of course, again, when you're looking at it themselves, they're not doing anything that they tell you to do. So they want you to be skinny, but they're over there eating like a whole like cake, right? And they weigh a lot, right? They want you to work, but they haven't had a job in like, 5 years, different things like that. That's also something to be on the lookout for as well. But again, what makes that abusive is the pattern of behavior, and also the way that controlling. Like if you don't do what I say, right? If you don't meet my expectation, something bad is going to happen to you. I'm going to yell at you. I'm going to hit you. I'm going to not give you, money. I'm not going to let you go with you to do this thing. I'm going to punish you because you won't do what I tell you to do. Yeah. I'm going to withdraw my emotions, my feelings. I'm going to punish you in some way because you won't do what I say.
Right. So also kind of like the ghosting, like disappearing, like, okay, if you don't do what I say, I'm not going to be accessible to you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And ghosting is a really big red flag that sometimes we see. So ghosting, of course, is the opposite of love bombing, right? So love bombing is when they're all, and I always say that's a red flag too, because it's romantic and we like that. But if somebody's coming on strong and they like just met you, they're like, I'm going to marry you. Okay, we just met 5 minutes ago. Like, I mean, that's something to think about too. But ghosting is the opposite of that. When you're involved with somebody and they completely and totally disappear, you have to watch that too, because that is someone who doesn't care anything about your feelings. Because somebody who cared about your feelings would not be able to just disappear on you like that and not like have any contact with you and not care about the emotional toll that takes on you.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this, because if you're in a relationship with an abuser and they're doing these types of behaviors, and let's say you're the person and you probably don't even realize that you're being abused, but then like, how do you respond, or maybe you start responding to them in the way that they're kind of treating you, and it creates this weird dynamic. So how do
Yeah.
you
So
respond, when you're seeing these behaviors? What do you do?
well, first, I want to thank you for bringing up the fact that a lot of people that are in abusive relationships don't recognize it. And I know
Right.
people are like, how is that possible? Because they've normalized the behavior. It has become normal to you. Again, it's happened on such a steady sort of base that you've gotten used to every new change in behavior. And even when you get to the part where it's physical, you still normalize it, right? That's just
Mm,
the way so and so is. She's real fiery. When she gets mad, she just hits me over the head. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just who she is. You know what I mean?
mm,
Or when he gets frustrated, he just pushes me a little bit. It doesn't mean anything. Like you find a way to make excuses for it, right? And so
mm.
that's why it's hard to recognize it, and it's hard to get out of it because it's just become almost like routine for you. But I will tell people, like, once you start to I'm sorry, go ahead, Kelly.
The other thing that I thought about is when, like, if you express how someone makes you feel and it's hurtful, and then they flip the
Mhm.
script on you
Mhm.
and basically get mad at you because you told them that it hurt you, and then they get upset and make it about them. Isn't that another form of abuse?
Yes, that's gaslighting and also narcissism, right? When they make everything about them. Everything is
Mm-hmm.
your fault.
Mm-hmm.
That's definitely a red flag if
And
someone
then
says
it's like,
something like
you hurt me because you said that.
that. Mhm. But then it's
Like,
like, I would have said that if you hadn't done so and so to make me say it.
right, right. So that's good. Okay.
Mhm.
I'm sorry. You were starting to say something else, but I wanted to make sure we.
No, I was thinking, that it's really interesting because it's like, I always want to like dispute this notion that people that are in domestic violence relationships are stupid, because they're not. They're some of like the smartest, brightest, strongest, right? They're not weak. Strongest people that you ever meet, but they have just got caught up in a situation where they know they've been gaslighted so much they no longer trust themselves. They no longer trust their gut feeling. They no longer trust what they're hearing or seeing or feeling. Because everything now is coming through the filter of this abuser who's slowly worn you down and gotten you to the point where only what they're saying is the truth, right? And
Mhm.
everything that you're feeling is like, fake news.
Right.
And so, it's not, and it's not an issue of just having, if you were just a little bit stronger or anything like that. It's figuring out, because first it takes you a while, again, like you said, to figure out what's happening to you. And then when you're figuring out what's happening to you, you have to kind of see what your situation is like. We talked about this before, where the most dangerous um, sort of part of a DV relationship is when the person decides to get out. Because when the person decides to break up with you, the abuser has lost all power. And that's like when you see the news, you see somebody get killed or kidnapped, or they've had acid thrown in their face. Because sometimes when these people say, I'm going to kill you, like they mean I'm going to kill you. And so,
Mhm.
you have to ascertain, what is your safety? What is your safety plan? It's not just that simple, I was walking out the door. Like, the question that I get all the time is, why did they stay? Why did they stay? They stay for a lot of reasons. The number one reason is because, again, they think it's love. They think it's love and they want to hold on to it. And it wasn't always bad. And don't forget, in the beginning, they were being love bombed and everything was great and perfect. And if they could just get back to that, everything would be great and perfect again. Sometimes these people, that you have a family, never underestimate somebody's like desire to keep their family together. They want to
Mhm.
stay married. They want their children to have both parents. Sometimes there's a social stigma, depending on what culture you come from. They don't
Mhm.
believe in divorce. There might be financial reasons why you stay. um you might be dependent on this person for finances, or you guys might have created this fabulous life together that everybody's jealous of. And you can't see yourself walking away from that. And another thing too is lack of resources. I work for a domestic violence shelter, It's been around for 41 years, and you would be surprised. A lot of people have never heard of Jenesse Center, right? And if people have heard about shelters, like nobody knows what a shelter is because it's kind of shrouded in mystery, but they know it's no place they want to go, right? I don't want to go to it. They're thinking like it's a place like the YWCA with some cots. It's not safe. It's not clean. And so it's the lack of information about the real resources that are out there that they, that they can walk away from the stuff that they're holding on to, be it, this car, this house, these clothes, this image, right? And walk into a better life, somewhere else that you can get legal assistance, right? So if he's telling you, if you leave me, I'm gonna take the kids. If you leave me, I'm gonna get you deported. If you leave me, I'm gonna call the police. Like all these different things, you can get legal services, free of charge. You can get mental health services. You can get help with the safety plan. So if you can't just walk out the door today because it's not safe, you can have somebody help you plan so that you can put yourself in a situation where you can walk out the door and be okay. And so it's just because
something, Angela. You mentioned something about the YWCA. I want to make sure that everyone knows that we're not saying anything disparaging about the YWCA.
Oh no.
Let me just finish. I'll let you say. What she was saying is someone may have a perception of that, and she just gave as an example.
Yeah, as an example, because everybody knows kind of like,
YWCA, because we love the YWCA and they do great things. So, and I'll let you say what you want to say about that. But I just want to make sure.
And actually, one of my favorite people in the world runs a YWCA. So, but just more like and maybe that's the wrong word. It's more like a homeless shelter, right? Just just a shelter with some cots and different things like that. And so it's just people's perception. And it's a scary thing. Like nobody wants to come into shelter. I get that. Nobody wants to walk away from the life that you have. It's a scary, scary thing. And it's not easy. It takes a lot of courage to do. And it's hard. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do, is to walk away from everything and to start over. Even if you don't physically have to leave your home, but you've put all these years and all this love and all this effort into this one person, and to have to walk away from that, no matter how it's turned into a nightmare, it's the hardest thing for many people to do.
Now, thank you for explaining that, because like we've discussed, sometimes on the outside looking in, some people can be critical and like, why are they staying? Why are they putting up with this? And there are many reasons, and it's very complicated as to why people stay. And that's
one of the things that always, but one of the things I always want to say, Kelly, to piggyback off of what you said, is don't try to understand why a person stays, because you never can, right? And that's really not your job. Like if you have a friend or a loved one or a relative that's going through DV, your job is not to understand why they stay. Your job is to help them any way they can. Your job is to be empathetic. Your job is to withhold judgment. And I know how easy that is. Like, I told you so. I told you if you just listen to me, right? But you don't want to do that because they already feel bad enough. They need to know that they can come to you for comfort and support. And typically it takes a DV victim 7 times to leave the abuser before they're actually done for good. So on the outside looking in, you become frustrated, right? Because you're like, man, like why do you keep going back? Or why are you staying? And you must like it. And I can't do it anymore. If you like it, I love it. You know what I mean? And you just get all and it's true, because you go through it with the victim. You know what I mean? But you don't have the power. You're powerless to change it. So what I tell people is sometimes, you might have to take a step back, but never completely shut the person out, because when the person is ready, you are the person who they're going to come looking for help.
Angie, I do want to bring another topic up. What happens when you are the one confidant who knows what's happening with the individual, and they have other loved ones, family, friends, but you've been entrusted with this secret and sworn to secrecy? What kind of support do we have for those individuals who are holding that secret, who are hurting silently because they can't tell the person how bad they feel about, how hurt they are that they're being hurt, and they can't go to anyone else. What's available for the confidants of the loved ones, who are being abused?
I would urge anybody in that situation to seek counseling. Now, I know, like, depending on how you feel about counseling, you might be like, I don't need to go to counseling, but you do. If you're holding that like inside, again, it's affecting you and you're going through it with the victim. You can find a domestic violence agency, either a prevention or intervention agency near you, and they will offer you counseling. And counseling is actually something I recommend if you have a friend or family member who's a victim of domestic violence, because they can also help you understand the cycle of violence, and they can help you understand not only what you're dealing with and help you process your feelings, but also what your friend is dealing with and help you understand why they are acting the way that they are acting. And they can also help you, with resources so that you can go back to your friend and let your friend know, oh, you can go to the shelter and it's fantastic and doesn't even, look the way you thought because I've been there. Or I know where you can get legal help, right? I know where you can get mental help. I know where you can get, vocational help, because I have personal connections with these people. So I would suggest, just like, people who have relatives who may have substance abuse issues and they go for counseling as well, that if you have a friend or family member, relative victim of DV, seek counseling yourself to help you deal with it, because it's not easy. It is not easy.
And so, as we're coming to a close, our last topic, we covered some of it, but I think there's some other points that can be made here about identifying kind of personality traits of abusers and the personality traits of the victims that they seek. Like, what are some of the traits that they're looking for in someone to abuse?
Well, I can say, like, there's a lot of work that's done with abusers who go to therapy and really kind of want to change their behaviors. And I have listened to some of them talk about how they chose their partner. And a lot of times it has to do with what we talked about earlier, boundaries. If they know that they can continue to push your boundaries, then they know that they have somebody that they can continue to manipulate. If you let them get away with this thing, continue to get away with this and continue to do that, they're just going to just keep pushing it and keep doing it. And so that's the main thing to look at. It's hard to say, like, they're going to do this one particular thing, but if they keep messing with your boundaries, that's one of the things that you can tell somebody's abusive, and that's one thing that they look for in people that they abuse. And it can look like anything, but you know what your boundaries are because you defined your boundaries for yourself, right? And anytime somebody crosses that line, beware of that.
And just for clarification, I don't believe the discussion that we've had so far is classifying abusers as any particular gender.
No. Please, please, please understand that when you are in an abusive relationship, it doesn't matter what race, what gender, what socioeconomic background, what sexual orientation, what age, like anybody can be a victim of domestic violence. Men, about 1 in 7 men report being victims of domestic violence. And we know that that's lower because, if a man reports being a victim of domestic violence, people tend not to believe it. They tend to scoff, same-sex relationships, they experience abuse, just the same as heterosexual couples. It's really interesting because a lot of times abuse doesn't look the way that you expect it to look, which is why it takes people so long to recognize it. And abuse does not happen, um, you know, at the hands of people who you expect are like the stereotypical abuser.
Right. And
there's a lot of different abuses.
Pardon?
Right. And There's a lot of different abuses too, right? So it's not all physical. It's
Yeah.
emotional, it's financial, it's spiritual, digital, sexual. And so that's another reason too why it takes people a time to realize that they're being abused or they're abusers, because it's like, I never hit anybody. What are you talking about? Or I've never been hit. No, but you have experienced all these other things.
Right. Absolutely. And when you talked about what was revealed and some of the things that you heard about, as the abusers were sharing in their counseling, is there a common theme around why people abuse, why
Yes.
abusers abuse? What is
Yeah.
that?
So the common theme is that is what they saw growing up. And so
Mm,
even if you have men who like vow that they're never going to hit a woman, they end up doing it because we tend to mimic the behavior of our parental figures. We just
mm.
do, because that's all we know. And so
And
it's
that's
two
a
things.
man or a
They're
woman.
mimicking a man or a woman, right? So that's two things. So you're mimicking the behavior that you saw with the women or men in your life, and also the peers around you. A lot of times abuse is normalized in a culture, right? We say this all the time. You need to get him in check. You need to get her in check, right?
Or that.
Um,
Mm.
yeah, different things like that. And so it's like, or we see the people around us in abusive relationships. So again, it's normalized, like, oh, well, it happened to my mom, it happened to my aunt, well, yeah, my mom used to talk like to my dad this way, that's just the way women are, it's again, it's our environment. It's our
Right.
environment and what we grow up to. And it takes a lot of work to recognize that and to break out of that.
Do
But
me a
first, you have
favor.
to recognize that it's not normal.
Exactly. So can you let's break down the verbal abuse and kind of emotional abuse, because like you said, sometimes certain things are normalized in certain families. Sometimes it's been labeled as a part of this, associated with certain
Mhm.
cultures or things like that. So let's talk about what's healthy and what's not as it relates to verbal interaction and abuse versus and also emotional interaction and abuse.
So, verbal abuse is when you use words to try to hurt people, try to tear them down, right? You're intentionally trying to make somebody feel bad, right? You're calling them all kind of names. You're
It's all,
loud.
yeah.
I'm sorry.
Tone,
Yeah, you're
volume.
loud. Yeah, your tone. You're loud. You're aggressive. You're kind of menacing. You're throwing things back in their face that maybe they told you in confidence. Um,
Now,
you're not fighting fair. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kelly.
it doesn't have to be loud though. They can speak softly
Oh,
and
no,
still
no, no,
be.
they can speak softly, yeah, but it's just this thing where they're using things that you said to them, like, in confidence against you, and then emotional abuse is, we talked a little bit about that, sort of the withdrawing, right, from you, making you feel bad, like you've done something wrong. And emotional and verbal abuse kind of sometimes they can go hand in hand, right? Because if somebody says something to you like nobody will ever want you, I'm the best you can do, it makes you feel a certain type of way. And in a lot of ways too, that's why emotional and verbal abuse is just as bad as physical abuse, because and not to take anything away from physical abuse, because physical abuse is horrible, but bruises can heal. But once somebody's in your head and they really have you, thinking that you need them or that you're worthless, and that'll stick with you, and sometimes that'll even follow you into another relationship. You get conditioned for that. You've heard the word grooming a lot,
Yes.
right? But you've never heard this in this context, and it's the same thing. Just like somebody's grooming somebody for sex work, um, the abusers are grooming, right? Their mate or their partner, right? For this DV relationship.
Talk a little bit about that, and then we will close. Really, the grooming for a
Mhm.
domestic violence relationship. What does that look like?
Well, I think we touched on a little bit when we talked about sort of the love bombing, because that's sort of the big thing in the beginning. Um, testing your boundaries. All right,
Okay.
that's another thing. You know, stuff that we kind of talked about kind of before.
Discuss. That's the label for it. That's what
Yeah.
they're doing. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, and we don't talk about it. We don't really talk about it in that context, right? We don't talk about it as grooming, but I like to, because again, I think it always reminds people that again, this doesn't happen overnight, right? And a person didn't get in a domestic violence situation overnight, so you can't expect them to get out of it overnight either. It takes time to deal with everything that's going on, particularly if their life has become intertwined.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Angie, thank you so much for joining us today. I'd like to thank our viewers and those who've made comments. Thank you so much for your participation. Want to let you know that in upcoming episodes, we're going to talk about releasing shame and blame associated with domestic violence. We're also going to discuss finding the courage to help. Even in the future, we're looking at a mini series within the series around narcissism and others. So just continue to stay tuned with us. And again, thank you so much, Dr. Parker. I'll close
Oh, thank
formally.
you for having me. Thank you for having me. And again, we love the YWCA.
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. And so grateful for everything. And I'm just going to have a few closing words, and I'm going to share some information about some upcoming, current campaigns and a rally that's coming up this weekend. But thank you so much for joining
Oh,
us.
and before I go, can I share our hotline?
Yes, please, please, please. Please share, contact information for the Jenesse Center and how to get help there from you.
So if you or someone you know is a victim of domestic violence, you can call our 24-hour hotline, 1-800-479-7328, and you can visit our website, www.jenesse.org. That's JENESSE.org.
Thank you so much. And
Thank
I
you.
look forward to seeing you very, very soon.
Thank you so much.
All righty. Thank you. Thank you again for joining us on our 62nd episode of Impact Media Presents. Look forward to seeing you again soon. And before I close, I would definitely like to share some information about current movements. There's the Justice for Michelle Avan movement, as well as a rally in Los Angeles. And if you're available, we'd like you to attend. So I will close by sharing those flyers. Everyone have a blessed day and stay safe. Thank you very much.